She poured the wine, looked me in the eyes, and whispered, "Don't tell him about tonight." In that moment, the whole world felt like it was holding its breath. I hadn't planned to stay long that evening. It was meant to be a quick stop, just to return a book I had borrowed from my friend. His mom answered the door, and for a moment, I forgot the words I had rehearsed on my way there. She stood there in the doorway, dressed in a soft gray sweater that draped gracefully over her shoulders, her hair loosely tied back as if the day had already worn her down a little. Yet there was something about the way her eyes brightened when she saw me, a warmth that was neither forced nor distant, just naturally inviting. "Oh, it's you," she said with a small smile, stepping aside. "He's not home yet, went out for the evening. But come in, don't just stand there." I hesitated for a heartbeat, then stepped inside. The familiar scent of their home wrapped around me, a mix of freshly brewed tea and the faint, lingering spice of dinner. The hallway was quiet, almost too quiet. "You can wait if you want," she said, closing the door gently behind me. "Or just drop it off, but honestly, it's been ages since someone kept me company here. It's always so still when he's not around." There was something in her tone, light-hearted, but edged with that softness people use when they don't want to admit they feel lonely. I followed her into the living room. The lamp beside the couch gave the room a mellow glow, shadows curling in the corners, and the rain outside brushed faintly against the windows. She motioned for me to sit. "So, how's life treating you these days?" I set the book on the coffee table and smiled, a little awkwardly. "Busy, I guess. Work, late nights, same old story." She nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Tell me about it. This house feels like it runs on silence lately." I almost missed the chaos. We both laughed lightly. I noticed how easily the conversation slipped into something comfortable, not forced, not formal. Just human. Her presence had always felt composed, like she carried a quiet confidence wherever she went. Tonight, though, there was a touch of weariness behind her eyes, the kind that only shows when the world finally quiets down. I don't know why I didn't leave right away. Maybe it was the way the rain had started to thicken outside, or the way the soft lamplight made the evening feel slower, more deliberate. Maybe it was the way she glanced at the clock, then at me, and said with a slight smile, "You're in no rush, are you? Stay a little. It's nice having someone to talk to." And just like that, the night shifted, not in any dramatic way, but in that quiet, unspoken moment when an ordinary visit becomes something you know you'll remember. I didn't expect the evening to stretch beyond a quick knock on the door. My plan was simple: return the book I had borrowed, exchange a polite word or two, and head back home. But when the door opened and she stood there, framed by the glow of the hallway light, the routine of the night shifted ever so slightly. She wore a soft beige cardigan over a plain white tee, her hair gathered in a loose knot that left a few strands brushing her neck. There was a trace of the day in her eyes, a mixture of tiredness and the kind of calm that comes after everything finally quiets down. "Oh, it's you," she said with a gentle smile, stepping back to let me in. "He's not here right now, went out with a few friends. But you can come in, it's been ages since I had company around here at this hour." For a moment, I thought about handing her the book, saying a quick goodbye, and heading back into the night. But the warmth in her voice, not forced, not formal, made the quiet house feel less empty. I stepped inside, and the door closed behind me with a soft click. The familiar scent of their home wrapped around me, something warm, like a hint of cinnamon and the lingering aroma of dinner. The living room was lit by a single lamp in the corner, casting a soft amber hue over the couch and coffee table. Outside, rain had started to mist against the windows, the kind of rain that doesn't demand you rush, but suggests you linger. "You look like you've had a long day," she said, leading me toward the living room. "Work?" "Yeah." I nodded, setting the book on the table. "Long hours lately. But it's good to finally slow down for a bit." She tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, her movements unhurried. "I know the feeling. This house is usually a whirlwind when everyone's around. When it's this quiet, I almost forget what it sounds like to just sit and talk." Her words hung there for a moment, carried by the hum of the refrigerator and the soft patter outside. It wasn't loneliness she radiated exactly, more like a certain longing for presence, for simple conversation. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked suddenly. "Tea, maybe? Or just stay a while before you go back out in that rain?" I hesitated at the edge of the couch, unsure whether to sit or leave, but the warmth in her tone left little room for formality. I sat, the cushion dipping slightly under my weight, and she smiled faintly as if that small decision had already made the night a little less quiet for both of us. And in that subtle, unremarkable moment, the air between us shifted, not enough to call it anything yet, but just enough to know this visit wouldn't fade from memory as easily as the others had. The rain had settled into a steady rhythm outside, brushing against the windows like a soft drumbeat. The lamp in the corner cast a warm halo over the living room, making the space feel smaller, more contained. She returned from the kitchen with 2 cups in hand, steam curling gently from the rims. "I hope you like chamomile," she said, offering one to me. Our fingers brushed as I took the cup, a brief, accidental touch, but warm enough to notice. "Chamomile's perfect," I replied, shifting slightly to make room for her on the couch. She sat down beside me, not close enough to seem deliberate, but not distant either. Her cardigan slipped a little as she leaned back, revealing the smooth line of her neck. She tucked her legs beneath her, holding her cup with both hands as though drawing warmth from it. "So," she said after a moment, her voice softer now, "what have you been up to? I feel like I only ever see you in passing." I smiled faintly. "Work's been keeping me busy. Late hours, early mornings. Not a lot of time for anything else." She nodded, her gaze lingering on me for a beat longer than casual conversation required. "That's a shame. You're at that age where life feels like it's always rushing ahead, isn't it?" I let out a quiet chuckle. "Something like that. Sometimes I wonder if I'm actually moving forward or just keeping up with the clock." Her lips curved into a thoughtful smile. "That feeling doesn't go away as quickly as you think. Some nights, this house feels like it's just waiting for the next sound. The next voice. It's too quiet sometimes." The way she said it wasn't heavy, just honest. Vulnerability wrapped in calm composure. I found myself studying the way the light played against her features, softening the edges of her expression, tracing faint lines of time near her eyes. "Do you ever miss the noise?" I asked. "All the time," she said, her fingers gently circling the rim of her cup. "But I also miss the parts you don't notice until they're gone. Laughter in the kitchen. Footsteps upstairs. Even small arguments, they fill a house." There was a pause, not awkward, but the kind that holds its own weight. I sipped my tea, letting the warmth steady me. She looked toward the rain-slicked window, then back to me, her eyes a little brighter now, a little less guarded. "You've grown up a lot," she said suddenly. "I still remember when you'd come over here with your messy hair and that old backpack. Time sneaks up, doesn't it?" "Yeah," I said quietly, smiling despite myself. "Feels like it happened overnight." She laughed softly, a warm, quiet laugh that filled the space just enough. And in that gentle glow, with rain whispering outside and the house wrapped in its rare hush, I felt the first real pull of something I couldn't quite name yet, something calm, something close. The clock on the wall ticked softly, its hands edging closer to the late hours. The rain outside had grown heavier, a steady curtain against the glass that made the world feel even more distant. We had been talking for what felt like minutes, though time had a way of slipping past unnoticed in that warm cocoon of lamplight and low voices. She stood up, stretching slightly as if deciding something, and glanced toward the kitchen. "You know," she said, a hint of mischief threading her calm tone, "tea feels too quiet for a night like this." I raised an eyebrow. "Too quiet?" She smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Stay right there." A moment later she returned with a bottle of wine cradled in her hand and 2 slender glasses by the stems. The soft pop of the cork seemed louder than it should have been in the stillness. She poured slowly, the dark liquid catching the lamplight as it swirled in each glass. "I don't usually do this on a weeknight," she said, settling onto the couch again, a touch closer this time, close enough that I caught the faint fragrance of her perfume, something delicate, like jasmine and evening air. But sometimes you need to break the pattern. I accepted the glass, our fingers brushing again. That touch, brief as it was, lingered in my awareness longer than any polite handshake ever had. To breaking patterns, I said quietly, raising the glass slightly. She clinked hers against mine, her eyes holding mine a fraction longer than before. To breaking patterns, she echoed. The wine was rich and smooth, the kind that warms you slowly. Conversation picked up again, but it had changed, less about the day, more about the edges of life people don't often share, the moments of solitude, the strange calm of growing older, the way certain nights feel different for reasons you can't explain. I found myself listening more than speaking, drawn into the easy rhythm of her words, the way her hands moved as she talked, graceful, deliberate, fingers occasionally resting on her knee or brushing back her hair. There was a pause, subtle but present, as if the room itself was listening with us. The rain pressed on, steady and constant. She turned slightly, her shoulder now angled toward me, and with a softness that carried both playfulness and something unspoken, she murmured, "Don't tell him about tonight." The words were light, wrapped in a faint smile, but they landed with weight. I felt my breath catch for a moment, not from shock, but from the sudden awareness that this wasn't just an ordinary evening anymore. "Your secret's safe," I replied, my voice low, almost matching hers without meaning to. She tilted her head, the corners of her lips curving gently, and for a heartbeat, the silence between us felt alive, as if the night had paused just to see what would happen next. The wine had left a faint warmth in my chest, not enough to blur the night but just enough to soften its edges. Outside, the rain still tapped gently against the windows, steady and constant, like a quiet witness. She leaned back into the couch, one leg tucked beneath her, the other crossed casually. Her fingers traced the stem of her glass in slow circles, as if drawing shapes only she understood. Her earlier words, "Don't tell him about tonight," still lingered in the room, almost visible, like smoke that refused to fade. I set my glass down, fingers resting lightly on the rim. "You know," I said softly, "that almost sounded like we're doing something wrong." She let out a quiet breath, part laugh, part sigh. "It's not wrong. Just private. Some things are allowed to belong to the moment, don't you think?" Her eyes found mine, steady yet searching, as if testing how much truth I could hold without letting it slip. "I get that," I said. "Not everything has to be explained." Something in her expression eased, a subtle shift, like a door opening slightly. She reached across, her fingertips brushing my forearm as she gestured toward the glass I had abandoned. "Drink before it goes flat," she said with a faint smile. That light touch, barely there, but deliberate, sent a ripple through the stillness. My skin registered it long after her hand had withdrawn, and I wondered if she felt it too, or if she was simply used to carrying a kind of quiet gravity without realizing it. The conversation drifted again, this time more personal. Fragments of her younger days, stories about places she once wanted to visit, plans that had been postponed so long they turned into habits instead. I listened, nodding, occasionally asking questions, though mostly I just let her voice fill the room. "It's funny," she said after a pause, "how a house can be full of people and still hold empty spaces." I glanced around, the framed photos on the shelves, the faint marks on the wall where years had passed. "Sometimes it takes someone from outside to notice them," I said quietly. Her lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "And sometimes it takes someone from outside to remind you they're still there." The clock ticked softly, the rain slowed, and for a moment, we just sat there, two people, not quite strangers, not quite anything else, bound by a night that neither of us had planned for. I lifted my glass, looked at her, and said, "Then let's keep this night where it belongs. Just ours." She held my gaze, the corners of her mouth lifting, and touched her glass to mine again, this time barely making a sound. "Our secret forever," she murmured, almost as if sealing a promise neither of us had spoken aloud until now. The clock on the wall now read well past midnight. The once steady rain had slowed to an occasional whisper against the window, leaving the house wrapped in a stillness that felt heavier than before. The wine glasses sat nearly empty on the table, their rims catching what little light the lamp offered. She stood by the window, arms folded gently, looking out into the night. Her reflection in the glass seemed softer than her actual presence, a blur of light and shadow framed by the faint streetlights outside. "You should have left an hour ago," she said, her voice barely louder than the rain's after echo. It wasn't a reproach. More like a quiet acknowledgement that time had slipped through the cracks unnoticed. I stayed seated on the couch, elbows resting on my knees, hands loosely clasped. "I know," I said. "I just didn't feel like rushing out." She turned her head slightly, just enough for me to catch the outline of her face, the faint lift of one corner of her mouth, the thoughtful look in her eyes. "It's easy to lose track of time when it's quiet like this." "Quiet's rare these days," I replied. She let out a small laugh through her nose, the kind that doesn't quite become a laugh. "That's what makes it dangerous. It tempts you to stay." Her words hung there, and for a moment neither of us moved. There was no demand in them, no hidden plea, but they held something that felt heavier than what they said on the surface. I watched the way her fingers played with the edge of her sleeve, a small, unconscious motion. The air felt different now, not heavy, just more deliberate, like every sound and gesture carried meaning. "You don't have to see me out yet," I said quietly. "Unless you want me gone." She turned fully then, her expression softer than before. "That's the thing," she said after a pause. "I don't want you gone. But I also don't know if I should want you to stay." The words landed between us like a delicate thread, thin but impossible to ignore. I rose slowly, stepping toward the window where she stood. Not close enough to close the distance, just enough that I could see her more clearly in the muted light. "Sometimes it's not about should," I said, my voice low. "Sometimes it's just about letting a night be what it is." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. She glanced at me, a hint of something unreadable in her gaze, hesitation, curiosity, something softer beneath both. "You have a way of making things sound simpler than they are," she murmured. "Or maybe they're just simpler when no one else is watching," I replied. The room was quiet again. The clock ticked, the rain had nearly stopped, and yet neither of us moved to end the moment. "Maybe you're right," she said finally, her voice almost a whisper. "Maybe just a little longer." The night had thinned into those late hours where everything feels suspended, too late to stay, too quiet to rush. I finally rose from the couch, the empty wine glasses catching a faint gleam from the lamp as I stepped past them. She followed me to the hallway, her cardigan draped over her shoulders now, the fabric hanging loose as though even it was tired. "You should get going," she said, though her tone lacked any real insistence. Her voice carried more of a question than a command. I slipped on my shoes slowly, feeling the weight of the evening in every gesture. "Yeah, it's late," I murmured. She stood by the door, one hand resting lightly against the frame. Her other hand reached out almost without thinking, brushing a bit of dust from my sleeve. The touch was nothing more than a brief sweep, but it lingered as though it had been deliberate. "You've always been too polite," she said with a small, warm laugh. "Even now, you look like you're worried you overstayed your welcome." I smiled faintly. "Did I?" Her eyes softened, and she shook her head just enough for a strand of hair to slip loose from her bun. "No. Not at all." The air between us thickened in that small entryway. The house was still, the rain outside finally faded to a hush, and the silence felt like it had been waiting for something to fill it. She stepped a little closer, close enough that I caught the faint scent of her perfume again, subtle, like a memory. Her fingers reached up, straightening the collar of my jacket. It was a small thing, almost unnecessary, but her hands lingered a second too long. "Thanks for tonight," she said, her voice low, her eyes still fixed on the collar though her hands had already drifted back. "It's been a while since someone stayed just to talk." I met her gaze, and for a moment neither of us looked away. There was nothing to explain. The night had shaped itself, and we had both allowed it. Anytime, I said softly. Her hand moved again. This time, it met mine. Fingers brushed first, then rested, not in a grip but in that hesitant stillness where either pulls away. She exhaled slowly, her thumb tracing the side of my hand as if memorizing the moment. Go on, she whispered with a smile that almost faltered. Before I make this harder than it already is. I leaned slightly, not enough to close the space entirely, but close enough to feel her breath against my cheek. She rose just a little, her lips pressing briefly, gently against my cheekbone, a warm, quiet kiss that carried no promise except that it happened. When she stepped back, the air felt lighter and heavier at once. Good night, she said, her voice softer now, almost like a secret being sent with me into the dark. The door eased open with a low creak, letting in the cool scent of wet pavement and night air. I stepped out first, the gravel soft under my shoes, but turned when I felt her presence still behind me. She leaned lightly against the doorframe, cardigan pulled a little tighter now as the breeze touched her. The porch light above her cast a warm halo that blurred the edges of her hair and softened every line on her face. For a moment neither of us spoke. The night had become the kind that carries more weight in its silences than in its words. Drive safe, she said finally, her voice calm but carrying something more than the usual farewell. I nodded, slipping my hands into my pockets. I will. She tilted her head slightly, a small, thoughtful gesture. Tonight, it doesn't have to mean anything complicated, she said. It was just nice. That's allowed, isn't it? Her words were simple, but the pause between them held an honesty that felt rare, not an attempt to rewrite the evening, but to keep it safe from misunderstanding. Yeah, I said, a faint smile tugging at my lips. Nice is enough. She looked at me as if searching for something, then let out a quiet breath that sounded like relief. Good, she murmured, more to herself than to me. The street was empty, the rain now only a memory glistening on the pavement. I walked a few steps, then stopped, glancing back. She was still there, one hand on the edge of the door, her silhouette framed by the soft glow behind her. You'll keep it between us? She asked, not as a demand, but as a small reassurance. I met her gaze across the space between us. Our secret forever, I said quietly, the words carrying neither promise nor burden, just truth. Something shifted in her expression, a softness that wasn't regret, wasn't longing, just an acceptance that this night had happened, and it didn't need to become more or less than what it was. Good night, she said again, this time with a small, warm smile that made her seem lighter, younger almost. I nodded, returning the smile. Good night. As I walked toward my car, the gravel crunching beneath each step, I felt the weight of the evening settle somewhere quieter inside me, not heavy, not restless, just present. Some nights don't shout their meaning, they whisper it. When I started the engine, I saw her still standing there, framed by that porch light, watching. She raised her hand in a small wave, and then, slowly, the door closed behind her. Driving away, I realized there would be no trace of tonight except the memory we both agreed to keep. No messages, no evidence, nothing to unravel. Just a moment in time, suspended and safe. Some nights don't need a witness. They just need to be remembered.